The Huna Code in Religions by Max Freedom Long. Chapter 2. Huna in Ancient Egypt. The Kahunas have left no written record of their Huna system of beliefs. So far as is known, they have never allowed their language to be subjected to recording in written form, although we shall see in due time that some Kahuna initiates of about the beginning of the Christian era translated the pre-Polynesian tongue into the current Greek and used that language to insert coded Huna passages into the Bible, especially into the 4 Gospels. However, to continue our survey, let us leave the period of the Gospels and go back to about the year 3000 BC to look for evidence of the belief in totems and taboo magic in Egypt. As the earliest cultures developed and progressed, totemism took on a more complicated form, and following pictures painted on cave walls or cut into stones, as at Altamara in Spain, and in the earliest tombs uncovered in Egypt, writing was slowly developed. At first, it was always picture writing, but some of the pictures were gradually simplified for easier drawing. For instance, on the Nile, it became necessary to indicate water simply by drawing 3 wavy lines, one above the another. Instead of drawing 5 pictures in a row to indicate 5 men, only 1 man was drawn, and after him 5 straight lines to show that 5 men were met. An invisible thing like the spirit body of a man could not be pictured, of course, but by common consent, such an invisible body was indicated by a pair of arms and hands, uplifted from the shoulders, apparently holding up something which could not be seen. At about the same time, the art of picture writing was progressing in China, in India, and in the valleys of the Tigris and Euphrates. There, the same process of simplification was already beginning, with signs replacing pictures. But for some lands, the development of alphabets was still millenniums away. In fact, the Chinese did not, until the present century, advance past the use of simplified pictures, which stood for ideas rather than for the letter sounds making up words. Writing manuals were important in the development. In Egypt, the papyrus plant supplied bark strips, which could be used to make a rough but practical paper. Ink was invented in various colors, and a reed with a split end served as an admirable pen or brush. In Sumeria, the lack of paper influenced the rapid change from pictures to signs. Clay tablets, or cylinders of moist clay, were used to write upon, and as the best instrument to mark on such a material was a stick sharpened to a slanting wedge-shaped point, the signs came to be made up of combinations of little indentations, all much alike in shape and allowing almost no picture drawing at all. In Egypt, when the change to the use of signs for sounds was made, the old pictures were retained for some time and given letter meanings, but the system was clumsy, and in much of the writing which was done in early copies of the Book of the Dead, sentences had to be accompanied by one or more of the old pictures to act as aids in understanding what was written in the new mode. Eventually, the signs were simplified, and the writing became devoid of pictures. We all now call the system the demotic, D-E-M-O-T-I-C. While the invention of writing was moving ahead in Egypt, the totem and taboo system was retained, coloring all religious beliefs as well as the growing knowledge of the stars and their movements. But there came a day when the Sumerians moved in and conquered the Egyptians, forcing upon them much of their more advanced culture, including their views on religion. The old religion of Egypt was not easily displaced, however, and the totem creatures and gods, along with the worship of the sun and the symbol of light and conqueror of darkness, changed only enough to absorb the new elements brought in by the Aryan Sumerians to darker Egyptians. Thus, some 5,000 years of totemism on the Nile began to change by about 3000 BC, and to include elements similar to those in Huna. Up to that time, when the Aryan Sumerians came into power, and he writes Aryan-Sumerians came into power in Egypt and introduced the belief in the god Osiris and his wife Isis and their son Horus. The chief of the totem gods had been Ra, the sun. Ra, or La, L-A, is the sun in the Polynesian dialects of the code we are to study. Ra had created the world when he was the totem god, Tem, T-E-M, and from his own substance he had also created a family of gods. Some totem abstractions, such as the sky and earth, were personified as gods in animal bodies and heads, or with human bodies and the heads of animals or birds. Many legends had developed to tell about the acts of the gods and their relation to those over whom they ruled. When the Sumerian belief in Osiris as the creator god was introduced, the Egyptians promptly identified him with their Tem, or Ra, R-A. They did the same with Mother Isis and the divine son Horus. In short order, they had everything adjusted, and the walls of religious belief were pushed out to accommodate the old creature gods as well as new counterparts. Let me read that sentence again. In short order, they had everything adjusted, and the walls of religious belief were pushed out to accommodate the old creature gods, as well as the new counterparts. Ra, the sun, had long been known as the Father, for he had created the earth through a god produced from his own substance, one Thoth, T-O-T-H, who is the Word, and who reappears as the Word in the Gospels much later, and who issued the orders which caused the creation of things ordained by the Father. With the two simpler religious beliefs of Egypt and Sumeria, joined on the Nile, a surprisingly complex new set of beliefs resulted. The salvation offered the good and just man by Osiris, who was one with his wife, Isis, and their son, Horus, in some mystical way, was complicated by the necessity of getting past a judgment presided over by nothing less than a group of old totem gods. The soul of the deceased, as we learn from the Book of the Dead, entered the Hall of Judgment and was weighed in balance by Maat, M-A-A-T, whose father of truth lay in one of the pans of the scales and must not be outweighed by the sins clinging to the soul. A monkey god sat above the scales on the top beam to supervise the weighing, while Thoth, who had invented writing and most of the arts, stood by to write down the results of the test. His ibis head, impressive on his human body. At the base of the scales lay a giant crocodile god waiting to devour the soul if it failed in the weighing. While all of this was very primitive and heavy with superstition, there were, oddly enough, Huna elements associated with parts of the belief. Some of these elements have been identified even at this very late date. Where they came from, or when, or how, we do not know, but they were there. Even before the Sumerian conquest, the Egyptians had what now appears to have been a knowledge of the 10 elements which make up the man in Huna. Evidently, the full understanding was soon lost, and ideas were garbled, and one mixed with another. But fragments, which are listed in the Book of the Dead, speak of Huna either directly or in symbols. The famous students of ancient Egyptian lore have done their best to bring out of the confusion of this at this point. Oh, just a minute. Let me start that sentence again. The famous students of ancient Egyptian lore have done their best to bring order out of the confusion at this point and to decide what the Egyptians of the Pyramid Age believed went into the making of the human soul. They have been hindered by the modern Christian belief that God has but one soul, and none of them has thought to ask whether one of the parts listed by the dwellers on the Nile might have been our subconscious part of mind. Open bracket. The same difficulty confronted the Christian missionaries in Polynesia when they undertook to list the parts of man, which were specified by several words used by the Kahunas. The missionaries counted only one soul or spirit, while the Kahunas counted 3 in each man. Close bracket. The hieroglyphics used to write about souls by the Egyptians at the time of the 6th dynasty give us our first clue to the fact that Huna knowledge was held at the time. In Huna, any bird may symbolize a spirit or self in quotes. And in the scenes depicting the burning of souls in the ovens of hell as found on the walls of the tombs, the souls are represented as long-legged birds. The same type of bird was used in the picture writing to stand for souls. In accompanying scenes, the shadows of the souls are also being burned, and the glyph for these is the parasol. Appropriately enough, for parasols cast shadows and so make a shade. And then it says in brackets, we still speak of the shades of the dead. For the subconscious or low self of Huna, the Egyptians used the symbol of the human heart. And we see a jar containing a heart being placed on one pan of the scales in scenes showing the balancing of the soul against the feather of truth in the judgment. The Kahunas believed that the solar plexus or bowel region was the center from which the low self presided over the body. The head was the symbol of the conscious mind, or middle self, as in Huna. And in the burning scenes just mentioned, this self is also being burned. It is pictured as 3 heads. The number 3 is significant in this connection, as possibly standing in its way for the Huna belief in the triune nature of the man, he having 3 souls or selves. Max Muller, Muller, in his book Egyptian Mythology, Chapter 10, writes as follows, quote, the doctrine of life after death was so richly developed in ancient Egypt that here we can sketch only a few of its most remarkable features. It would take an entire volume to do justice to this chapter, for no people ever showed so much care for the dead as the Egyptians, or so much imagination about the life hereafter. Even in the earliest prehistoric times, the soul was believed to be immortal, as is shown by the gifts of food, drink, and ornaments found in all graves of that period. There was only a large tray or pot placed over the bodies, which were interred in crouching position, or a few stones or mud bricks show the gradual effort to guard the dead against animals of the desert. But the large tombs of the kings at the beginning of the dynastic period commenced to betray precisely the same care for the existence of the departed as was manifested in later times. In the pyramid period, embalming begins with the kings. Increasing care is given to the tombs of private citizens, and rich inscriptions reveal that most of the views about life after death, which the Egyptians kept so faithfully, we see from them that in the earliest period, as well as in the latest, the most contradictory views reigned concerning life after death, in harmony with the general character of Egyptian religion, which desired to preserve the ancestral opinions as equally sacred without examining them too closely and without systematizing them. We may infer that the most primitive period held that the spirits of the dead haunted the wide desert where the graves were situated, filling the stony mountains of the inhospitable regions by night. In consequence of their miserable abode and hard existence, such spirits were not very safe company for the wanderer in the desert. The best wish for the soul of one's relatives may have been that it might become the most dangerous among these demons, feared and respected by the rest. The custom of placing all kinds of weapons beside the dead to protect him in this life of danger in which he is hunted by the terrible demons of the desert or of the underworld also looks like a remnant of such primitive ideas, although it survived until the new empire. End quote. The respected early mythology and the developing star lore of astronomy all came to mingle in the ideas expressed in the Book of the Dead as it grew in length and complexity century after century. The old gods of early mythology were grafted to the Osiris, Isis, Horus legends and beliefs. Nothing was thrown away, and magic increased the collection of charms, amulets, and special markings mentioned as of value in the ritual to be followed by the spirits of the dead. The element of ancestor worship, which seems to have developed directly from mediumistic contact with the dead in the earliest ages, was firmly established in Egypt and was part of the system of beliefs in China. However, in Egypt, the ancestors were not so much worshipped as lovingly served with periodic gifts of food and drink to sustain their souls. In addition, priests were hired to recite sustaining magical formulae at the tombs on appropriate days. And I'm going to pause here. This is partway through this chapter. Isn't this interesting? My goodness. Okay. The Book of the Dead. The Egyptian, I'll just say here, I own the Book of the Dead, the Egyptian Book of the Dead. I have never read it. If you'd like me to read it here, let me know. I don't know that it's interesting. Don't know that it's pertinent. I guess it is, seeing as he mentions it all the time. Okay, so till soon.